Hi, thanks for joining me and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is part 2 of the video I did last week on the Yes album tape from Rhino High Fidelity, and I would urge you all, if you haven't seen that, to take a look, because I run through an awful lot of sort of general information about tape, the tape market, companies producing tapes, etc. Anyway, if you have watched that, then here we are. What we're going to be talking about today is this, the two, I would say, whether it's the first or second, equal first release of a reel-to-reel tape from one of the major record companies. And again, in the previous video, I talked about many specialist, very niche, small companies producing tapes. And what these essentially are sort of one-to-one copies of the original master tape. And if I show you what we get in here, that's the sort of the insert which shows the original master tape box, side 1 and side 2, and then this is the tape. Now, just to very quickly describe this is literally just it's actually what you would call a third generation tape. Or I would say a second generation copy. What you've got is the original master, which is in this form. It's a tape. If I show you this, what you can actually see here is the original master is 2 tapes, okay, and 2 reels, and this has been copied onto 1 reel here because this particular tape, this is Recording the Masters LPR 90, which is the long play version of their highest quality studio mastering tape, which is SM900. Now, SM900 is a very high output tape. What that means is the saturation level is in the old days, we would have referred to tapes as like +3, +6, +9 dB. SM900 would be a +9 decibel tape, which means that you can record well into the red. Most machines, my Studer A80 for instance, only shows up to +3 decibels of into the red. This will actually go to +9 quite easily before any saturation, which is sort of distortion, and sometimes people actually record these things hot because that saturation is something that in the digital world people try to emulate, in fact. But for making exact duplications of masters, etc., you don't want distortion. So this you can record incredibly hot. I'll just overlay a little clip here at the beginning of this T-Rex album, and you can see the initial drum beats of Mambo Sun are immensely loud and immensely heavy, and literally by the time you've got this far in the tape, you will know that there is something very, very, very special going on here, and very, very, very different to what was available on the original album. And I will later on in this video compare this tape with my original UK vinyl pressing, which I can just briefly show you here. Okay, so this is a copy of the original master, and that's it. So the first, people, Rhino would refer to this as a 3rd generation copy. I think that's technically incorrect. I would say this is a 2nd generation copy or a 3rd generation tape, but that's really arguing the toss about it. Exactly the same thing. We're not arguing about what this is, just what you call it. And that's just my brain works in pure logic. And, I don't think the master is a 1st generation copy. The master is the source, if you see what I mean. So the safety master that they would make to send to Recording the Masters, I would say that's a 1st generation copy or a 2nd generation tape, depending on how you want to refer to it. But the word copy obviously infers that it's not the original. Anyway, so What I want to talk about now is a little bit about how these are made, okay? And I can go into a bit more detail than I did in last week's video about the Yes, just because I've discovered a bit more detail since then. So Rhino take the original master tape of this album, the tape that's, the box of which is pictured here, and they actually make 2 flat copies of that, exact flat copies at their headquarters in the US. And then they send those 2 copies to Recording the Masters, who are based in Avranches in northern France. And some of you may know, some of you don't, but I have a website called the Reel-To-Reel Rambler.com, and that was set up just to promote tape, because I've been a lifelong audiophile. I've worked in the hi-fi industry, and there's so much rubbish talked about tapes and master tapes and this, that and the other. And in 2014, I had the opportunity to, well, not only to hear, but to buy a master copy, which was the same sort of generation as this. So let's second generation copy, third generation tape of an Oscar Peterson album. And that was being produced by a company that was then called Lutz Precision, which was run by a chap called Volker Langer. Lutz Precision was sort of a automotive manufacturing company, and his tape division was an offshoot of that. So he then changed the tape division name to Horch House, and then the guy has been tirelessly working to promote and grow the tape business over the years. And only last year, Horch House was purchased by Revox. Volker went with them, and now Volker heads up Revox's new analog division. And of course, from Revox, you can buy, they've got a catalogue of hundreds of tapes, because they've not only got their own new catalogue under the Revox brand, but they've incorporated, taken over the Horch House catalogue as well. So there literally are several hundred tapes just under that banner. And as I listed in my last video last week, there's Analog Productions, the Tape Project, Hemiolia. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of other tape companies, smaller companies, very niche companies, making their own reel-to-reel copies. Okay, so there's a surprisingly large catalogue of titles available, but these 2, this T-Rex and the Yes album, are the first 2 that have been done kind of in-house by one of the major labels, and that is the thing that I think is absolutely, utterly applaudable, and really it's what I've been sort of, working for. If we say working, for free, no one pays me for this, but working for the last 10 years, really, with the Reel-To-Reel Rambler to sort of try and help this, encourage this to happen. Now, because these things are literally sort of second, third generation, however you want to refer to that, but copy of the actual master, without changing formats, without being, digitized, without being cut, from a magnetic medium to a mechanical medium, which is what vinyl is. They are startlingly close to the original, and there is absolutely nothing to compete with the sensation of actually being there in the recording studio on the day that these albums were put together. It's staggering, it really is. And of course these things are niche, these are made in real time, by studio engineers, and obviously I'm in the UK. By the time I bought them, had them shipped to the UK and paid the VAT and duty on import, they actually worked out around about £300 each, pretty much bang on the nose. So, you're paying £300, but a blank roll of LPR 90 will set you back nearly £100 once you paid the VAT and shipping and everything on it. So it's not an awful, it's not a, this is not a cash cow for the labels, not whatsoever. Now, Rhino have specified that they're going to make a limited run strictly of 500 titles of these. I've since found out that there was a cut-off, I believe, like a break point where of 250. So if they make 250 and they don't sell, they can stop it there. But I'm pretty certain that reading between the lines, because the Yes album for starters has gone from in stock to on back order. And I know the numbers, my Yes album was, I think, 173 or 179, something like that, serial number. So my gut feeling is they've made 250 up front. Certainly in case of the Yes album, they've all sold out, so they'll be making the next batch. The number of this one, this one is 173. My Yes album is 50 something. So I think these are going to sell out, and I think Rhino will be making more titles, and I absolutely applaud that, and I'm so excited. Okay, so what I want to talk a little bit more about now is how these are made exactly. So, as I said, Rhino make 2 1-to-1 copies of the original master tape, okay? They send those to Recording the Masters in France. Now, Recording the Masters have a tape duplication system, which was set up by a chap called Ian Betson, who's a UK-based reel-to-reel tech. He used to work at the BBC, and he was contacted by Recording the Masters, and he basically specified a system which fitted their requirements, which is a fully balanced system with full monitoring from any one of the machines at any time against the source, so they can check sort of levels, phase accuracy, all these sorts of things, just to make sure everything is absolutely bang on and that the copies are virtually indistinguishable from the source. And it's a system that uses a Studer A810 as the replay machine and a bank of 5 Revox PR99s, all fully restored by Ian and calibrated and set up for 4L PR90 as the recording machines. And obviously this system was specified, it was set up, and then some test copies were made. So Ian recorded a master tape that they had access to, made a copy on this system, and then sent the original master and the copy to Rhino in the US for them to compare. And they were very, very happy that the differences were as I say, if you've got well set up studio quality machines, the generational loss is very, very small. I have comments like, oh, well, you get 3 dB loss each generation. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. If you set it up well, you can get absolutely, it is really, 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 really hard to tell the difference between the original and a copy if you've got everything absolutely set correctly and you're using well-maintained studio mastering quality machines. Okay, so the quality of these things is absolutely the closest to, without actually having the original master or that first generation safety copy. These are about as good as you're ever going to get to the quality of the original master. And the sound quality, which I will go on and discuss in a bit, but spoiler alert, it is breathtakingly staggering. It really, really, really is. Okay, now we've discussed how these are made. What I want to talk about now is what you need to play these back, because there is a little bit of sort of confusion and sort of misinformation about this. So these are 15 inch per second 2-track stereo tapes recorded on the CCIR, which is otherwise known as IEC, equalization curve. Now at 15 IPS on tape, there are 2 different equalization curves, if you like, that have been used historically. One is NAB and the other one is CCIR. Now, you can play a CCIR recording back on an NAB machine and vice versa, but you will get an incorrect well, it's an equalization curve. So you get incorrect equalization. So if you played this CCIR tape back on an NAB machine, you would get basically not enough bass, and I'll come back to that, and too much treble. So it would be bright and sort of light in the bass. Now, let's talk about that just a little while, because there will be people out there with NAB machines, because most consumer machines were actually NAB EQ. Now, when I first got into tape, my first tape machine was a Technics RS 1500, which I've still got, and that's NAB EQ only. Now, I have had my machine modified with a direct head output, so I can add an external tape stage, which would allow me to get over this. But, you know, for the purposes of this conversation, it's NAB only. And the first tapes I got, the first master copies I've got, were CCIR copies, because almost everyone who's making master copies these days, whether that's Rhino, Analog Productions, the Tape Project, Hemiolia, etc., Chasing the Dragon, whatever, they are all CCIR. Now, some of them, Hemiolia will, Ultra Analog Recordings will, some of them will make NAB EQ copies on request. It's nearly always on request, because most people want CCIR, because that's kind of the modern standard, so to speak. Now, I played back tapes on my NAB machine, and even though I wasn't getting the fullest bass and I was getting too much treble, the quality of that bass and the quality of that treble is still absolutely startling. I mean, let's just talk about the treble. You don't get any kind of tracking distortion, tracing distortion, grittiness, surface noise, anything like that on tape, because it's not a mechanical medium like playing vinyl is. You just don't get it. It's staggering. So the fact that it's, 3 dB or 6 dB up at sort of 20k, it almost doesn't matter, because it's just, you're just listening to this thing and think, I've just never heard cymbals sound like that before. They are startlingly real. And the bass, also, one of the other things, probably the biggest thing that you'd notice in the difference between tape and any other format really, is the bass is just absolutely rock solid, subterranean solidity manifested in music. It is unbelievable. So the fact that you've got, a bass roll off, it's like the bass that's there will be thunderous compared with what you've heard on vinyl. So this is my personal opinion, and of course this is not correct, so you make your own call on this. But if you've only got an NAB EQ machine and you fancy getting one of these tapes, I wouldn't let that put you off it. I really wouldn't. I'd buy the tape and just save up to either get your machine modified for CCIR replay, or modified so you can add an external tape preamp that allows you to do that, or just save up and buy yourself a CCR capable machine at a later date. That's incorrect but honest advice, if you see what I mean. Okay, 15 IPS, you've got to have a 15 IPS machine, because if you've only got a 7.5 IPS machine, first of all, you probably won't fit a 10.5 inch reel on it, and secondly, the music will play at half the speed, which won't be fun for anybody. And you really do need a 2-track machine rather than a 4-track machine. You can sometimes get around playing this on a 4-track machine, but it's by carefully selecting what output you want, but you're only replaying a small part of each of the tracks of this. And just, I mentioned this in my last video, but just to give you an idea of how these might sound. Most of us, I think, our only experience of tape was cassettes, the compact cassette. And that ran at 1 7/8 inches per second. And it was 4-track, which meant you've got 2 tracks going one way like an A side, and 2 tracks coming the other side, the other way like a B side. And that's what these are 2-track, they've only got one side. Okay, they use the full width of the tape just to go in one direction. So let's compare this to a cassette. On a cassette, you've got 4 tracks, first of all, going, 2 one way, 2 the other way. On this, you've only got 2. So instantly, you've got double the sort of width. If we talk about square footage of tape per second of music, so to speak. So you've got double on this, purely by virtue of it being 2 rather than 4 track. Next, the width of this tape, 1/4 inch, is twice the width of cassette, which is 1/8 of an inch. So you double that again, so you've got 4 times the real estate, okay? So the tape width and the track count gives you 4 times the sort of real estate over cassette. Then you've got the speed, right? So cassettes are 1 7/8. Double that, you get 3 3/4. Double that again, you get 7.5. Double that again, you get 15 inches per second. So they're 8 times the speed of cassette. So take that 8, multiply it by the 4 due to the track width and everything, and you've got 32. So, for each second of music, there's 32 times the amount of tape passing across the head. That's just one way of describing it. But if you think that you're improving the sort of the potential resolution, the potential dynamic rate, slew rates, dynamic contrast, the dynamic swings by a factor of 32, you start to realise that this is 32 times better than cassette. Now, obviously, most of us would think CD or LP is better than cassette too. Absolutely. But this is just literally a straight 1-to-1, let's say 1-to-1-to-1 copy from that original master tape. Rather than with an LP, for instance, it's got to be, for starters, an LP is very rarely cut from the original master tape. Sometimes it's these days with modern sort of, analog production, Kevin Gray cut tapes, records, sorry. But more often than not, back in the day, they were cut from a production master, which is a copy tape, okay? So you've taken that production master, and whereas in this case, you literally make a copy of it, and here you are. If you were cutting it to vinyl, you take the production master and you make a cut, which goes through all the various EQs for the RIAA and, sort of monoing and rolling off the bass and sort of curtailing dynamics just to keep the thing in the groove, de-essing to cut down sibilance, all this sort of stuff. And then you've got to plate that cut, and then you've got to mould that cut into the father, and then mould that father into the mother, mould the mother to produce the stampers, and then press from the stampers the actual vinyl LPs. So even to get your LP, there is a massive amount of processes, and every one of those processes will introduce some degree of loss, okay? And then you've got to replay it. And you can even replaying on some very, very high quality equipment. My turntable here it's not best in the world, but it's very high quality. That includes the phono stage, which is, just to give you an idea, it's 2 boxes. It's got 24 valves in it. It's, they're as high end as I could absolutely stretch to over the years. It's pretty no compromise. But even in all of that, then you've got to set the cartridge up. You've got to make sure the stylus is absolutely in the groove. The tone arm's got to be balanced absolutely correctly and aligned. There is so much to make sure that you've got it absolutely perfectly set up. Whereas this, again, you've got this copy, you pop it on your reel-to-reel machine. Obviously, you have to make sure your machine is serviced and set up correctly and clean, regularly cleaned. But you could spend, £500,000, £1 million on a record playing system, and you're not going to better a tape playing system with a decent, studio level tape machine at the start. And again, to give you an idea, my Studer A80, which I'll show you here, including the purchase, including the incredibly extensive sort of restoration and service I had on it, the whole thing probably owes me about £10,000. Now that's less than the price of my tone arm. It's about a third of the price of my phono stage. It's a bargain in terms of, the quality that you get per pound spent. Tape is actually a bargain, believe it or not. That may sound like a fairly bonkers thing to say. Anyway, I just want to run through what machines that you can currently get to play this on, because we've just touched on the cost of machines, and they are not cheap, of course. But if you wanted to buy new, I mentioned Revox earlier and Volker Langer. Revox have recently introduced the B77 Mark III, which is a new machine. Some people say, "Oh, it's just an old machine," and that's just not true. It's a new machine, sure. It uses some parts that are the same as were used for the Revox B77 Mark II. In the world of manufacturing anything, it doesn't have to be 100% new parts in every new product. You buy the latest Porsche, it might have the same switches as was used in the previous one. It might have, the same springs that was used in the previous one. It might be based on the same chassis. It just varies. But the B77 Mark III is a new machine, and it is currently available from Revox, and it costs, it depends where you are in the world, but between 15 and 20,000 pound, euros, dollars, whatever. Okay, that's quite a lot of money, but for a brand new, newly manufactured machine, it's not that bad. And there is an awful lot more in a high quality. I mean, the Revox B77 Mark III, it's not a studio recorder, but it's what in the old days you'd have called a prosumer, semi-pro kind of quality machine. They have been, I know of people who've got souped up Tim DeParavicini modified B77s and made, commercial recordings on them. So, the fact that these are made on PR99s, highly tuned, which is the successor to the B77 Mark II, then, it's not something to sort of turn your nose up at and sniff. Okay? So that's the Revox discussed. And incidentally, on the subject of whether it's an old machine just being refurbed, which it isn't, you can buy a Revox B77 Mark II that's been refurbed, factory refurbished by Revox, offered with a guarantee. And I think they're around 8,000 euros, something like that. So, that brings the price down. Still quite expensive, especially when you compare what I paid for my Studer A80, for instance. Other brands that are completely new machines, there's Ballfinger, which is a German company, which I think was the first of these sort of companies to start making a fully brand new machine. I actually flew over to a Hamburg show a few years ago, specifically just to sort of, feast my eyes on this, with my reel-to-reel ramble hat on. Stunning machine. I have seen one in the flesh and used one. It's a beautiful machine. Ballfinger also make OEM. They make the Thorens TM1600, which is, again, beautiful machine. Very kind of modern, slimline. Two other brands that make completely from scratch new machines. One is Metaxas and Sins. They make a bunch of machines that, really are art pieces, really. They're staggering to look at. They're not cheap. I think the cheapest is sort of 40,000, that sort of touch. But you're buying one-off handmade pieces of art here that happen to play tapes. Stunning to behold, stunning machines. And the last one I want to mention is Analog Audio Design, which comes out of France. It's an engineer called Christophe Martinez. And I haven't actually used one of these myself, but I've heard reports that they're very, 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 very good indeed. And again, they kind of marry the concept of tape, which is, mechanical engineering, with kind of computer control. So I'd very much like to have a play with one of those one day. And then there's a bunch of machines that are, I can't say that they're 100% new, because they're built generally on old chassis. So there's two of them that spring to mind. One is Sonorous. They make a machine called the ATR10, which I think is based on a Revox PR99 or B77 chassis, but is vastly remanufactured, even to the point it's got a valve vacuum tube output stages, and it's not cheap. I think it costs like $35,000, something like that. And again, United Home Audio, which they've got quite a range. I think they start at around $10,000 and probably go up to about $100,000. And these all start life as a Tascam machine. And don't think of it as a Tascam that's just been sort of breathed on and tarted up. It's not it at all. They've been completely stripped down and just basic chassis components and things like that. The sort of mechanical parts that on a very small scale are just impractical to remanufacture. And then everything on top of that is new and specifically made. And again, these machines are just winning awards for the sound quality. Again, I've heard these, but only at shows. In fact, I've heard pretty much all of these machines, not the AAD, not the Sonorous, and not the Thorens at shows, okay? But those are new machines. And then I'm going to just run across, again, the machines that I've got, because this is much, this is the way I got into tape, and it's much more affordable. So I'll start with my Technics, the RS1500. Now, this is a great machine because it replays both 2-track and 4-track tapes. I bought mine and then had it serviced and everything. I think I probably spent about £2,000 on it overall. That was about 10 years ago. I think it's probably worth maybe £3,000 now, something like that. Now, I've got two other machines, both Studers, which Studer is the professional arm of the Revox company, or certainly was back in the old days. I've got a Studer A812. Now, this is an absolutely beautiful machine. It dates from the 1980s. It's referred to as a studio recorder reproducer. It will play 4 speeds, all the way up to 30 inches per second. It will replay CCIR and NAB. It is an absolute beautiful, beautiful, beautiful machine. Okay, now that I reckon has probably cost me around about £10,000 in terms of purchasing it and servicing it. So similar money to the Studer A80 that I mentioned earlier. But I kind of come back to the Studer A80 now. Now, this is my most beloved, to be perfectly honest. This is an original A80 and it dates from 1970. Now, the first owner of this was EMI, and they had it at their Hayes plant in Middlesex in the United Kingdom. This is referred to as a master recorder. I have also had a Studer A807, which is actually a more modern machine than even the A812. They all sound very, 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 very good, but I do love the A80 most of all, even though it is the biggest pain in the arse of the three to use, because all adjustments are kind of made with a screwdriver in little holes, and none of these can be saved. So every adjustment you make, you've kind of got to get your alignment tapes out and recalibrate and reset. Whereas on the A812, it's all done sort of, it's a fully analog machine, but the controls are kind of digital, if you like. So you can make an adjustment, save it, and then return to where you were, have different memory settings saved for different tapes and EQs and all the rest of it. It's a much more user-friendly machine. Okay, looking at a much more reasonable entry point, like my Technics. Okay, the Technics doesn't play CCIR, but there are machines out there that will. You can pick up something I think worth having probably for about £2,000. Okay, so entry into the world of tape isn't prohibitive. Okay, now let's get on to the sound quality. So first thing I want to do is just show you this. This is my UK original copy of Electric Warrior. That's the original inner sleeve, incidentally, which Mark Bolan on that side and Mickey Finn on the other side. And then here we are, that's side A. And the matrix number here is Fly 6A2U and says Porky on it. And then side B label Fly 6B2U and says Pecco Duck. Despite the cover being a bit scuffed on this and there being a few surface scuffs, this actually plays stunningly well. I would say it plays at least VG+. So it is a nice copy. And you know, this isn't a really cheap record to buy either. So again, it makes the tape, the value of the tape, seem even better than it otherwise might. But I played this all the way through. I've got a Clear Audio Master Reference turntable with a Clear Audio Unity tone arm, Clear Audio Da Vinci V2 cartridge, and an Aesthetics IO Eclipse phono stage. So, you know, whilst not best in the world, absolutely top flight, I think you could say, analog replay system. And this played back on that system, I would just say sounds really, really, really splendid. It's a fantastic listen, okay? But you put the tape on, and I'm playing this on the Studer A80. You put the tape on, and just literally from the first 2 or 3 notes, I mean, even just literally note 1, just sort of like a drum beat and guitar kind of crash at once. It's just the level, the weight, the slam and the authority. It's in another league. It's bigger than the difference between CD and vinyl. It's bigger than the difference between cassette and vinyl or cassette and CD. It's bigger than the difference of streaming. It really is. I mean, I think, frankly, that vinyl is a far superior medium to my ears than digital. And the LP, as I said, it sounds fantastic. And I did also listen to this streamed, just as I really wanted to set my reference points. So you play it on streaming, and it's a great album. It's absolutely chock-a-block full of brilliant tracks. There's not a track on there I don't like, but there's a couple of sort of deeper cuts that you don't necessarily leap to mind, like Monolith, for instance. When you're, everyone knows Mambo Sun and Cosmic Dancer and Jeepster and Get It On, but Life's a Gas, for instance. But every track on this is an absolute killer. But you put the vinyl on, and it blows away. It blows away the digital versions, in my opinion. And this. It blows away the vinyl by such a degree that since getting this tape, I've actually played this tape more than I've played the Yes, which is, I can hardly believe it, frankly. But the same with the Yes. It's so much more fundamentally better that you have absolutely no inclination to ever hear it on any other form again. Because it is, it's when even on a high-end system, when you're playing the record, it's like, well, could I get a better quality pressing? Is my cartridge wearing out? Do I need to tweak the VTA? Is it that? Is my phono stage right? Is it, there's all this sort of just subliminal kind of things going on. And with the tape, it's just jaw-dropping. You're in the studio and you're listening to the music, and the dynamic range and the weight and the solidity, the separation of every thread. Nothing sounds forced. I've seen a couple of reviews of this tape where it says the vocals are recessed. I mean, Mark Bolan he's got a soft voice and he sings, it's not right at the fore of the mix. His guitar, left and right, and centre too, because it's, I think he's the only guitarist on the album, but you've got this sort of strummed, often electric, often acoustic guitar, which typically is in the left channel. And then you'll have this sort of like just little licks of lead guitar, which is often in the right channel and sometimes in the centre channel. They're mind-blowing, and he kind of sings, he's above and slightly behind that, I think, which is, if you imagine you're standing there holding a guitar, your voice is up here, the guitar's down here, and, it's kind of in front of you, so to speak, and that's how it's mixed. And it's just, it is inherently right. The quality of Mark's voice, at times it sounds like he's whispering in your ear. It's so intimate and it's so absolutely, utterly real that it'll give you goosebumps, bring tears to your eyes and leave you speechless. It really, really will. But that's just his voice. Talking about the guitars, I mean, as I said, there's, I think there's often at times 3 guitar tracks on here. A rhythm track sort of, typically kind of strummed, and then just sort of some sort of picked out little guitar licks. And those guitar licks, they are divine. And it reminds me a little of Richard Thompson, who was the lead guitarist with Fairport Convention, but also played, the lead bits on, 5 Leaves Left, Nick Drake's album, and many classics. He's an absolute magician of the guitar in a, not in a thrashy way, but in a lyrical, melodic, dancey kind of pixie dancing type of way. And Mark Bolan's a little like that. It's eye-opening and jaw-dropping. And then the percussion on this, obviously you've got Mickey Finn's bongos, and you've also got Will Legend's conventional drum kit, and the drumming and the timing. I mean, I think Cosmic Dancer, for instance, the second track. I mean, the kick drum sound is just phenomenal. It's visceral. You feel it. You really can almost see it if you shut your eyes. It's there. And the weight of all the drums, and then when that backwards guitar bit comes in, it's so kind of Beatles-esque and trippy, but it's staggeringly real and staggeringly there. And then you get onto Jeepster, where there you've got this sort of wonderful left-right channel guitar sort of licks, and the bongos and the drum kit together, they're just absolutely incredible. Monolith comes next. Again, it's just it's staggering. And then Lean Woman Blues, the chit chat before they get started, and it's just I find little things like that really exciting. It's a bit like the first Fleetwood Mac album, the real sense of being there, but you are there for the whole song. It's down and dirty, bluesy drawl. It's staggeringly real. It really, really, really is. Okay, I'm not going to run through all the tracks on this album because the video will become just way too long, but they call it here Bang a Gong, and in brackets Get It On. I know it's Get It On, but Get It On was probably my favourite T-Rex track. My first favourite T-Rex track. I used to be my favourite karaoke track when karaoke first hit the UK. I was working at Celestion at the time, and if you gave me enough beer, then I could be coaxed up on stage to sing Get It On. But one of the things that I didn't give full, or didn't have full sort of realisation of, I suppose, previously of this album, the session musicians used on it. So First of all, I mean, on the track "Get It On," you've got that beautiful kind of bam, bam, and there's a piano kind of flourish, whatever you call it when you run your hand up the keyboard at the beginning and the end. That's actually Rick Wakeman, who was the Yes keyboard player from sort of 71, which is when this was recorded, through to 74, I think, and then from 77, maybe it was 4 or 5, 77 on for, a couple of years, and then on and off. So, that was of interest. And of course, that was, Yes were recording in Advision and Trident around this time. And of course, this is recorded at Advision and Trident. So very, very, very unconnected albums. Of course, Rick isn't on the Yes album. But there is a tentative connection, which I kind of quite like. I love your musical family trees, so to speak. This is also, of course, this is recorded at Trident, Advision, and also Wally Hyder's in the US. But other musicians on here, you've got Flo and Eddie, backing vocals, who, this is why I'm wearing my Zappa t-shirt, were probably most famously, they were the lead singers of the Turtles, but perhaps most famously were the backing singers with Zappa from around about sort of 70 to 75, that sort of era, which is my favourite era of Zappa. And they got very kind of androgynous, is it a girl backing vocal, is it a male backing vocal, or a child backing vocal almost? It gives them, they have an absolutely unmistakable quality. And they're the backing vocalists on here, which again, it's just one of those things that gives this its unique sound, and a unique sound which I think is absolutely staggering. And the last session musician that I just want to mention, he wasn't really a session musician, but he wasn't a full-time member of the band, is the saxophone played by Ian MacDonald. Now, Ian MacDonald, I'm not sure. I've been wanting an excuse to show this album for ages. This is one of my all-time favourite albums, and at some point I'm going to include it in a prog side project, best of kind of thing. I love it. I just think it's the coolest, grooviest thing in the world. One of my favourite all-time records. Anyway, Ian MacDonald plays the sax on here, and it's such a sort of a gutsy, honky tonk kind of sort of. It's just phenomenal, and he's fantastic. And the one other player on here that needs to be mentioned is Bert Collins, who plays flugelhorn, and it's anyway. This is one hell of an album. It really, really, really is. This is the best it's ever been available. Not by a small amount, by a massive amount. And I'm comparing this to a UK original vinyl pressing, played back on a pretty high-end turntable system, and streaming it. But last week's review of the Yes album, I was comparing that to the Analog Productions 45 RPM cut from the original master tapes, all analog by Kevin Gray, etc., etc., played back on the same system, and it's the same thing. I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of tapes now, and time again, it is just a tape thing. When you've heard what a master tape or a master copy or a second generation or third generation, depending on how you want to describe it, copy of an original master, when you've heard one, you'll never want to listen to anything else again. This is the source. This is where it's at. And the fact that Rhino are releasing these now, and that they are, they're never going to be cheap. It's not a mass market medium. These are made at real time, in batches of 5 at a time. You've got to have an engineer there to make an album. It's going to cost, take you an hour maybe, with the setup and alignment and all this sort of stuff. Or probably a couple of hours more like. These are stunning things. They absolutely are. They're beautifully packaged. I've got a little few scuffs on my box already. I mean, that's, you know, I have played this. I can't take it, you know, I can't stop playing it. It's just mind-blowing. It really is. The authenticity, the actual being there-ness of this. It's someone asked me on the last video to if I could quantify how much better these are than, you know, the vinyl copies or whatever. I'd say, you know, the best vinyl maybe gets to sort of 70 or 80%, these being 100. There's a few things that are just fundamentally in a completely different league to any other format you'll have ever heard. These are stunning, absolutely stunning. Right, on that note, I'm sure this video has gone on far longer than intended. On that note, I will say thank you for watching. Cheerio for now. And if you do like the video, please like, please subscribe. It really helps with the algorithms. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye now. Bye.